I like that movie. Where Geppetto becomes a puppet. You remember that movie? Yeah, I do. That was a good one. That was not the movie that we were talking about, was it, Newman? No, but
Uh,
it's. I'm sorry.
I'm working with children.
Oh my
And
God, what's happened to your
the
legs, Madhog? And welcome back. I hope you like that jazzy intro. Matt Hogg spent ages on it. This is the podcast that we do every week that we've done forever. And this week is Pinocchio 2022 by Guillermo Del Toro.
yes, not to be confused with Pinocchio 2022 or Pinocchio 2022.
Well, that Polly Shore abomination that we do not
Right,
speak
so
of.
with that joke out of the way, we can ignore all of the other Pinocchios from here until the end of time. I don't even want to mention how disappointed I am in the life and career of Robert Zemeckis, because that's just not worth my time. Anyway, focusing on a director we actually both enjoy, which is Guillermo del Toro. That is, by the way, the Pinocchio 2022 we are about to cover tonight. But before that, since we are both professional podcasters, we are both professional
Sorry,
podcasters,
as you as
right?
you as you said that, my neighbors upstairs, it sounded like they collapsed on the floor. So, but yeah, professionals. I hope they're okay.
Well, I couldn't have timed that better, I guess.
They're probably
I
fine.
am. So I go by Madhog Thy Master on the interwebs. I am a film critic, former film student. I work at film festivals. Generally, I like films. And I am joined tonight by Melody Dickens. She is a cartoonist, an
Yeah.
animator,
Yeah.
and also the only person I know who enjoys the Digimon movie.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty good movie. I mean, they butchered the original OVAs, but you know what we got? We got a cultural milestone. You know, we got time capsule of that late 90s, early 90s. It's gorgeous. Smash Mouth was in the soundtrack, I think. That's what you want in your Digimon movie. The Digirap.
And now we cut to Melly singing the Digirap.
No, we're not. No, 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 no. We don't. That never happened. I'm ready to go. Yeah, there we go. Digivolution is up and running. Did you see it? Did you hear it? Did you know it was coming? Oh, Digi-Destiny starts today. Let me hear you say, yo. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Anyway, the Pinocchio movie. You had a preamble prepared of
We do
interesting
have
notes
a
and
preamble,
stuff.
in fact. Guillermo del Toro, by now one of the most appreciated unique directors currently residing in that miasma of uncreativity better known as Hollywood. He definitely stands out by being the opposite of all that, by being actually a creative with a vision and definitely the talent to pull it off.
And heart.
Yes?
Yeah.
Right. So his breakout.
Don't forget. No, for all the boogans and all the scariness, you know.
Guillermo del Toro, as a director, has always had this penchant to juxtapose the whimsy and wonder of childhood innocence, fairy tales, and the like, to the very real horrors of history. Pan's Labyrinth, the backdrop to that which informs both the narrative, the conflict, and the setting, is the country of Spain in 1944, in the early days of the Franco regime, a little after the Spanish Civil War. It's that turbulent period in the history of the country that is famously depicted in Pablo Picasso's Guernica painting. You were going to make a comparison with
Yes.
Narnia
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
weren't
yeah.
you?
Well, with Narnia and other stories as well. It's more that it's an old idea that is that recurs setting something whimsical against a darker reality sort of backdrop and stuff you see in lots of different kinds of media. But Narnia does do it to an extent, not the same extent that Guillermo does it and does it well. But the whole Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe famously was, I mean, the reality of it was that they were refugee children, so like moving from the cities during the Blitz. And even the first book, I believe, took place after the First World War or around that time, and it was about a boy trying to save his mother. So there's similar themes to Pan's Labyrinth as well. But
Basically, a traumatic moment in a country's and a culture's history, the whimsical nature of the narrative juxtaposed to it. It creates a contrast that empowers the narrative and definitely gives a heavy weight to the theming that the film chooses to tackle. Also, you brought up the time in which a bunch of Messerschmitt from Nazi Germany were bombarding major urban centers
yeah.
in Great Britain. So children, for safety reasons, were moved out in the countries. And that is basically also the same premise for that one 1970s Disney film about broomsticks and bedknobs.
Yes, yeah. It's a recurring theme, but it's a nice, not a nice one, but it's a good one rather. And Guillermo
Essentially,
definitely did a good job with that, I think.
yes, Guillermo Del Toro might be one of the best ones to ever do this, to ever take this approach to storytelling. Once again, to ground and contrast the innocence of childhood through the lenses and filters of storybook aesthetics and narrative tropes with the traumatic happenings of our human history. The contrast between the two elements really drives home the point that childhood dies in the face of human horrors, the creeping threat of the adult world, that which kills childhood. Or rather, it is a scenario that tests that whimsy, that love of life, that childhood wonder
I,
harsher than anything else you could possibly
yeah.
get.
I mean, like on the other side of that, though, you could say that, like, you go the other way with it as well, is that the only thing that can counter, the horrors that adults inflict upon each other is kind of, imagination and creativity and the kind of whimsy that children have can combat that kind of depressive reality. So,
Oh, absolutely.
mm,
Absolutely. Both Pan's Labyrinth and now Pinocchio are essentially about that. So, as we established, Guillermo del Toro is directing this new Pinocchio. It is exclusively available on Netflix legally. Guillermo del Toro is not the only director in this one. It is technically a co direction. The other one would be Mark Gustafson. He has left his mark in the history of claymation, credits as a screenplay writer in both such classics as Claymation Comedy of Horrors and the California Racing Show. His directorial contributions would be Claymation Easter from 1992 and The PJs from 1999.
well, I like the PJs. It was a good, well,
Right.
I remember it being a
Okay.
good series. Upon rewatching it, some of the writing's lacking, but the animation was on point. As-
So you can see why Guillermo del Toro surrounded himself with people who actually know what they're doing with this,
yeah,
because stop motion animation, as it is the style of choice for Pinocchio, is one of the, if not the most tedious, meticulous, and time consuming means to animate anything. Animation under normal circumstances takes a long time to do, as you can probably attest to it.
hmm this is true.
And stop
If you
motion
if you
takes much longer than that.
if you ever watched my Christmas specials on my YouTube channel, there are silly
I
little
have.
things. Yeah, they took a good the second one took a good 2 weeks to animate. It was 10 minutes long,
Oh,
but like 10 minutes is, oh my goodness,
this film took 9 years to make. I still cannot fully wrap my head around this film. Not just the way it looks and how well animated and fluid the animation is, considering that it is stop motion, but the film itself is also 2 hours long.
Yep.
When is the last time you have watched a 2 hours long animated feature? They usually clock out at 100 minutes at best. Midway through this production, Guillermo Del Toro and crew, they all ran out of money, and the project had to be shelved momentarily. Then Netflix swooped in and did one of the rare things right that they ever done as a company, bought the rights for this film, and the film was then finished. And now we can all see it and appreciate it for what it is. And what it is, if nothing else, very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Ewan McGregor in the role of Grillo Parlante, or Gemini Cricket, if you're a filthy Anglo-Saxon. We have Finn Wolfhard in the role of Lucignolo, or Candlewick. We have David Bradley in the role of Geppetto. Christoph Waltz, of all people, plays Count Volpe. More on that later. There is a small role for John Turturro as a doctor, Byrne Gorman as the priest, and the lead protagonist, Pinocchio, is played by Gregory Mann, whom is an actual child actor. Apparently, there's also Tilda Swinton in this film, and my assumption is that she must be the creature.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, she doesn't have a credit here.
No, I can see that though, because like I'm pretty sure the creature had like this like weirdly kind of Britishy accent and stuff.
Okay, so
yeah,
more on that later. We are bearing the lead for now.
Mm-hmm.
But now the most interesting casting choice in this entire production would be Kate Blanchett. Kate Blanchett plays the monkey.
She wanted to go back to monkey. And she did.
Random monkey noises for 2 hours. And that, mwah, it's beautiful.
There's two like really big names and stuff that kind of took me by surprise as well. Like when you mentioned them last time. What was that? Tom Kenny?
All right. Tom Kenny does have several additional voices, I believe, in this film. But most interestingly, he does voice a specific character who has a small cameo, and we'll get to that. We also have Ron Perlman, the man himself.
Perlman, yo.
And he voices a fascist hierarch, which is known as a podesta. That would be the accurate terminology for it. We've been slightly coy about it. We've been bearing the lead, as it were, but this particular adaptation of Pinocchio is set during fascist Italy, which, when I think about it in retrospect, not only does it make perfect sense, considering the nature of Pinocchio, not just as a character, but also as an entity in popular culture and consciousness. I'm also surprised it has never been done before. At the same time, I'm not surprised at all, because Pinocchio has always historically been meant for children. Originally, Pinocchio was a fairy tale written by Carlo Collodi in the 19th century that was meant as the kind of storybook that you read at your kids when they go to sleep, one chapter every night. It is the kind of story that's not, it is the classic formula. It is the kind of story that's not concerned with a proper overarching narrative structure. Rather, every chapter feels like relatively self-concludent. Yes, every chapter has a trial, a conflict, and a resolution
like,
in which the
Journey
child...
to the West, or Winnie the Pooh.
Yes. Or The Hobbit in its original incarnation.
Or Winnie the Pooh, when he had to go through trials, there was that time they saw the heffalump tracks, and they had to look for them heffalumps, and they went around the tree, and then there were 2 heffalumps, and then went around the tree again, and then there were 3 heffalump tracks, and I don't think
we're going slightly off topic. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to provide some context to the original book as we discuss the film, because it's interesting. It's always interesting to me that somebody might even try at all to adapt Pinocchio into a film, considering that Pinocchio, by its very nature, is almost an inadaptable creature
And
because of that particular structure. I'm going to assume that most people outside of Italy are not familiar with the Adventures of Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, save from the famous Disney adaptation from 1940, which also famously only took about 3, maybe 4 chapters off of that book and spliced them together in a manner that makes almost sense structurally. They had the creation of Pinocchio by the Fata Turchina, and then he goes to school, and then we have the fox and the cat who ensnare him. We have Mangiafuoco and his puppet show. We have the Toyland segment, which is the most dire moment in the entire story. And then the climax, which almost feels not really connected to anything else, would be getting devoured by the big dogfish in the sea and
Monstro.
escaping from it. Now, it's not a whale. The reason why it's a whale in the Disney film is because they were more familiar with Herman Melville's Moby Dick.
Mm.
In truth, the creature was a dogfish. It's a colloquial term for shark. It's a
Ah.
big freaking shark.
In the Disney version, they gave him tentacles in the new one. Because a giant fish, that's not scary. Let's give him like tentacles.
I I'm just going to pretend that doesn't exist, okay? For my sanity. So, as I said, Pinocchio, famously a text that's difficult to adapt. Disney created a formula for it, and now every other adaptation, film adaptation, must have those 3 chapters in it
Mm.
by law. This one is no difference, really. It feels more like a remake of the Disney film rather than a proper adaptation. And I'm not seeing that in a negative light, because 1940's Pinocchio was good, and it definitely set the stage for any future adaptation for a good reason. If you are curious to see, however, a adaptation of Pinocchio that's actually super loyal to the source material to the point of it not being a good film in terms of structure, then I would recommend you the Italian animated Pinocchio film from almost a decade ago by now, directed by Enzo Dallo. It has scenes from the books that have never been adapted into film, which is different and fun for me to see. We have been stalling for enough time, enough with the preamble.
So I've got notes, and I'm guessing we can like I've got 2 pages here, and we can I get like obviously it's in chronological order. So the first thing that I wrote down was I like the little details, like a 3-legged dog. For no reason, there's a dog that only has 3 legs, and it's like, oh, that's kind of neat and stuff. It's just like it's a tiny little detail, but it's those kind of details that I think just like lend a bit of realism.
This actually segues perfectly to me complimenting about the aesthetic presentation in this film, because I have never seen a non-Italian film portraying a more verosimil version of a old Italian small town from
Oh,
the early 20th century.
so
They
so
did a
towns were
fantastic job.
so towns were kind of like that.
Several of our towns, they descend from medieval times. In fact, it's not unusual for set towns to have a very old medieval historic center, and more modern habitations have been built around it. The architecture in display in the outskirts of the town, as it is seen in the film, is very detailed and reminiscing of what older towns used to look like in the 20th century.
Hmm.
And there are plenty of towns who still look like that. It is a very unique landscape that informs the what is the general aesthetic of Italy in that particular period of time. What I like about this film is that, in spite of its fantastical nature, it is an extremely grounded film when it comes to
Mhm.
its setting. For the most part, that is, but we'll get to that.
So
For the most part, the setting is very grounded and verosimile. It is not overly romanticized like in Pixar's Luca. On that note, I appreciate the fact that the voice casting, the English version, did not try too hard to sound Italian with their accents,
mm.
because that made me very annoyed while I was watching Luca, let me tell you.
We'll cross the bridge when we get to it. When I get to when we start talking about Volpe. But anyway, 'cause I was really confused about his accent. But okay. Second note I've got is the pine cone idea was phenomenal. I did not catch on. Right, that obviously it's Pinocchio, right? But it starts off with Geppetto and his like original son, and they're like looking for like a good pine cone, right?
The pine cone is fundamental both at a symbolic level and narrative level, because it is the pine
Y-
cone from which sprouts the
Yeah,
tree that will
I
make
was,
Pinocchio.
yeah, so I was about to get to it.
The way the pine cone is framed in this film, it is clearly a symbol of the circle of life.
Yeah,
Birth, life, death, and rebirth right at the end. A reflection on the human condition, which this film has in spades.
spoilers, by the way. I don't know why you're listening to this podcast if you've not seen the movie already. Um,
Oh, we
but it's,
recommend it. Go watch it.
yeah, go watch it now, then come back. But like, yeah, so his child dies in Blitz style bombing. Like the fact that it wasn't even a planned bombing, like they were just trying to, like in the load and stuff, makes it even more tragic.
War is senseless. Life sometimes is
But I
tragic.
mean, the fact that it wasn't a planned thing, like it happened incidentally, like it was just
Yes.
so matter of fact, like that was really, but yeah. So his son dies, but all that's left is the pine cone, and so he plants the pine cone next to the grave, and then you see that progression of time, like just how long he has
Right.
been
So,
alone and stuff is just like,
okay, first of all, this film starts at the tail end of the Great War.
mm,
And then we slowly get to the final days of fascism by the looks of it, which doesn't make any sense because Geppetto was already a bit old in 1916 when this started. So, how old is he by the end of the film? Can we discuss about the fact that this film has an actual
oh,
crucifix in it?
I don't know. I think like the crucifix thing was handled pretty well.
You never see a crucifix in these films, especially not in an animated film
But it doesn't it
produced
doesn't
in
it doesn't
America.
yeah, it doesn't become like a super religious thing. And there is a part like halfway through where it's like, oh well, why do they like him? He's made of wood and I'm made of wood.
The choice of the crucifix makes absolute sense when you think about the fact that Geppetto, as a profession, is a wood carver in Italy in the early 20th century.
Mm.
Of course, he would get hired to carve a crucifix for the town's church.
But the fact that it remains unfinished as well is a nice touch.
It is used as a symbol for Geppetto's grief. It's rare to see a crucifix being used as foreshadowing, especially in an animated film, but I'm glad I had gotten the opportunity to see it.
Um, my next note is the blue fairy biblically accurate.
This is where Guillermo Del Toro gets very Guillermo
Mhm.
Del Toro with his designs, and I, for one, can appreciate it.
I love there's so many eyes everywhere.
They all come together into one
Well,
abnormal,
they're like little
fantastical
eye
creature.
creatures, the like little ghosts in the
Yes.
forest, and they all come together and they make the blue fairy, which is like that's so original and neat and like I like it.
This is where Guillermo del Toro definitely puts his spin on the source material, as is wont to do. Already, if setting Pinocchio during fascist Italy wasn't already a clear Guillermo del Toroism in that regard.
But I kind of
Uh,
like I kind of like that it's got that typical Guillermo misunderstood monster type tries to help. It sees an old man that's upset and is like crying out and stuff in the woods, for help. And it's like, oh,
He gets
he
drunk
gets
and
very
drunkenly carves a
very
puppet
drunk, yeah.
to replace his son. Yes.
Yeah, and the
So what I
blueberry
like,
obliges. It's like, well, I'm a mystical boogan. Okay, here you go. I'm gonna bring this thing to life for you. There you go. Like there's no malice there. It's just kind of
it's
like,
very nice.
yeah, it's
It's
otherworldly,
very good.
very a bit spooky.
For a moment, this felt like an adaptation of Astro Boy rather than Pinocchio.
Mm,
Astro Boy by Osamu Tezuka,
hmm
better known as the god of manga, godfather of anime, a very important, a big deal for Japanese culture in
And
general. He
Leo
created,
the lion and all that, and
yes,
yeah,
that
yeah. King
the
of the
Jungle
Jungle,
Emperor.
yeah, that one, yeah. That was
Right, so
Tezuka too.
Astro Boy is his most famous character, which he clearly explicitly based off Disney's Pinocchio. And Pinocchio, as it turns out, given the themes that it tackles, specifically what it means to be a real boy, which translates on a broader scheme of what it means to be human, makes for good science fiction basis.
Mm,
As such, Astro Boy is a famous work of science fiction that works specifically under that light. Basically, a father who is in the business of creating puppets
mm,
is struck by grief because his son dies in a freak accident that could have been avoided.
mhm.
So he makes a puppet to replace his son, but then rejects the puppet, much like Frankenstein rejects the monster, because the puppet in question, the child in question, is not his son. He's a completely unique individual with his own feelings and his own
Yeah.
curiosity and his own personality. And that's the centerpiece of the thematic journey that the film takes. And it was the principal theme of Astro Boy, at least at the beginning of it. The difference is that Astro Boy's father, Dr. Tenma, rejects him and sells him to a circus. Again, to continue on with the Pinocchio allusions here.
Yeah, yeah.
But in this film, the central relationship is between Pinocchio and his father as they go through these difficult times together and come out on the other side better people for it. And
Um,
that's absolutely lovely.
okay. Next note I've got is so Pinocchio's alive at this point and they're interacting and stuff, and I think he's telling him to like stay in the house, don't leave, don't he's like, well, I want to go to church. It's like, no, you're not going to church. You're a weird abomination. Anyway, and he says, you must obey your father, and it's just best line that comes back at, which is just, but I don't want to. Which is like, fair enough.
Right, he's a
As,
child. I think this is the best version of Pinocchio I've seen on film, so to speak. There are two best known versions of Pinocchio. You have the Pinocchio according to the Disney version, which is just pure innocence, a
mm,
purely innocent child who can't help getting into trouble even if he doesn't mean to, is naive, is pure, is fine. Then we have the real Pinocchio from the book, a little freaking monster. Let me just recount a couple of things he does in the book. He gets his father arrested by lying to the police, which is the scene that precedes him getting his feet burned out
ah,
at the
yeah, yeah,
fireplace. And this is also where the cricket first appears, trying to be the voice of his conscience. He reacts to him by throwing a hammer on him and killing him,
yeah.
technically. I mean, technically, the cricket comes back later as a doctor, so it might be immortal. But yes, that's all the amount of cricket you
Nah,
get in the actual book, by the
he
way.
was just playing.
Oh, here's a very heartbreaking scene when you think it in the context of the film. In that, remember that school book that Geppetto gives to
Yeah,
Pinocchio
yeah,
as
yeah,
he's about to
yeah.
go
That
to school?
belonged to the original kid. Yeah.
In the book, we don't have that tragic context behind it, which is for the best because in the book, not the school book, the actual book,
Mm,
Pinocchio sells the school book to get tickets for the puppet show, for the big puppet
Well,
show.
because you don't got no money and you want to go to the puppet show.
And
You want to watch
this is the one
Puccinello.
chapter. This is the chapter where we meet Mangiafuoco, which honestly, Mangiafuoco has always been pretty accurately represented in Pinocchio adaptations. Big, scary, burly man with a big beard. Also, he has a quirk. He's allergic to tears. So if he sees a child crying, he starts sneezing, which is his way to show compassion. So he's technically a good guy. He gives Pinocchio some money. Then Il Gatto e la Volpe come around and they drag him into a local bar, the Red Lobster. They get him drunk and they steal his money.
As you
And
do.
trouble after trouble after trouble. And then they come back later. And then Il Gatto e la Volpe, the fox and the cat, also come back later. They try to spook him while being dressed as ghosts. They catch him. In the struggle, Pinocchio bites the cat's hand right off,
As you do.
bites it off, and they tie him up on a big crucifix and they watch him burn.
As you do. Fun times
As
in,
you
in,
do.
in, in Turn of the Century Alley. Okay, so the next thing I've got is, well, so yeah, it's like carrying on from that like childish nature of Pinocchio, but this is more realistic to like an actual child rather than this idealized version that's in the Disney movie. Just when the how did you pronounce that the one that's played by Ron Perlman?
All right, so the character played by Ron Perlman in this film is the Podesta. Yes.
Okay, so when the Podesta, the first time he looks so like barges like pretty much into Geppetto's house, and he just says, "Who controls him?" And just like not missing a beat, Pinocchio just turns around to him and says, "Who controls you?" And it's like, "Oh my god!"
This film occasionally is a bit on the nose, I
I
have to
like
say.
that
I'm
though.
not.
I like no, because that's the child's response that's so like innocent, but
Right,
like cuts right to it that an adult wouldn't dare say and stuff. But he's got that
right.
innocence where like he
So
doesn't.
actually, so actually, what I wanted to say earlier, but we were lost in the tangent, is that I think this is the best version of Pinocchio as a character because it has a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. He's a rambunctious, curious, overly curious child that gets into mischief because of his curiosity and lack of a filter. So, what I like about his arc, and by extension, the whole thematic journey that the film undertakes, is that he doesn't learn how to be good. He learns to be himself in a world that would not accept him as himself. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. This is why I believe that the authoritarian backdrop that's used to inform the plot of this film works so well for Pinocchio. Because the original story is a very paternalistic, moralistic fairy tale. The lesson is that if you want to be a real boy, you have to learn to obey the rules, to be good according to societal standards of being good. But that was then. This is now. What does it mean to be good when you exist under fascism?
Mm.
That's what the film interrogates both itself and the audience with. That's the big question that informs the entire theming of it. And that's why it makes the story so much more powerful, because of the added historical context. A good boy under fascism is willing to die for his country, obeys the rules, obeys the father, obeys Il Duce, gets indoctrinated into hero worship
Yeah.
at a young age.
I'm trying to read my notes.
This is actually reflected well in the arc that Lucignolo has in this film, or Candlewick, if you will.
I just wanted to say so the fact that like at the beginning of the movie, with the original with his original kid, he would say, they would say, "Oh, good night, Papa," and he would go like, "Good night, my son." Like the fact that he starts saying that with Pinocchio, he says, "Good night, my," and then he decides against it and he turns over and he goes to sleep. I thought that was like that hit so hard.
So Lucignolo was represented being a kid the wrong way in the original Pinocchio. In this Pinocchio, appropriately enough, is the son of a podesta, the podesta played by Ron Perlman specifically. And is trying to be the good model Italian child by following his dad's every rule, going into youth military camp, and just become the model fascist citizen who's willing to kill and die for his country. And that is perfect, I
Mm.
believe. That is perfect because it flips everything we know about these archetypes on its head to empower the message that the film gives. And I have to say this, watching Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio as an Italian hits differently.
You know what? Like I get it though. Have you ever heard of a movie called Persepolis?
Yes, I've seen Persepolis. I have the graphic novel as well. I
Right.
know about the director. I also watched their second film, by the way. So
Right.
you
Well,
could say I did.
so like I get where you're coming from because like when I watched that movie and stuff, I didn't know much about it. I knew that it was, like, but it's it's set in Iran. It's not like while the Shah is still in power and everything. But the fact that like I wasn't even aware of the amount of British involvement where we kept the Shah in power basically for political advantage and stuff for us, and like we ended up like messing in another country's affairs, like to the point where like we set the country down like a really weird like bad route and stuff. But like as a British person watching that, you're like, oh my goodness, like that was our country, like we did that to them. We kind of like held back democracy and stuff, and like kept a monarch in power, and like just for oil. And it's like I don't know. There are harsh truths and stuff with countries that you call home, and definitely with Britain and stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff like I mean, even just the British History Museum and stuff. It's like, you ever gonna give that stuff back, Britain? Oh no, the finders keepers, you know. It's like-
Yes, well, it's the same between us and France. Give us back what you stole, Napoleon. Right. So, actually, wanting to be one of the colonialist, imperialist countries for a change is what made it easier for fascism to take over. Fascism doesn't just spontaneously combust into existence with one Benito Mussolini. No, there were already ideas circulating around strongly in so called intellectual circles. There was the early 20th century art movement known as Futurism. And by the way, a lot of fascist architecture is inspired by futuristic designs. And it's really something. It's quite frightening and dreadful for me, an Italian, to watch such a verosimil and authentic portrayal of fascism in Italy. Not just fascism in the general sense, but the very specific aesthetic of fascism in Italy. The architecture, the dress wear, the terminology. But the most horrifying part of it all was the use of music. There are several instances throughout the film in which you hear actual, real life fascist music playing in the background of certain scenes.
Oh, really?
Yes, they used real existing music that was produced during the fascist regime. For example, the scene that introduces Il Duce himself, Benito Mussolini.
I'm at that point in my notes. Mussolini in caps for the exclamation mark and the question mark. Okay.
That scene is supposed to be humorous
The
because you
reveal,
have
the big long
you have
car.
you have the reveal of Benito Mussolini with his big, ridiculous
Big
limousine
long
car. He
Italian
arrives.
car, and then he's just this
Yes,
tiny
he
girl's
arrives
dad.
at the scene of the puppet show that Pinocchio is holding, because Pinocchio and puppet shows, you know the story by now. He gets there, you see his miniature Napoleonic caricature, very
Mm.
small man. He waddles when he walks, which
How tall
is
was
supposed
he
to be
actually?
humorous,
Like, I mean, obviously the photos and the propaganda and stuff.
slightly below the national average. But regardless, that scene, as I said, it's supposed to be humorous, but I cannot be invested in the comedy because I am too busy experiencing a panic attack.
Yeah.
There is a certain piece of music that plays during his introduction in that scene.
Mm.
That music is the instrumental version of Giovinezza. Giovinezza is the anthem of fascism.
What does
It is the
it
most known.
what does it
It's
translate
the
to, Juvenista?
youth.
Oh,
Youth
that's
is the
scary.
yes. Youth is the most popular and famous anthem of fascism. You think of Italian fascism, you think of Giovinezza. Represents it to this very day. To this very day, it is the most popular song between the neo-fascists. It has been kept alive by the tradition, so to speak. It is a song that they teach you in school, mostly because you must never forget about such horrors. We cannot be allowed to forget. This is why I say that watching this film as an Italian hits differently, because you are privy to information that non-Italian will inevitably not know, such as the very specific choice of aesthetic and music that rings so true, so real, in spite of
Yeah,
the situation. It grips me, strangles my heart, and it gives me a case of the existential dread.
weird.
This is how effective this
Yeah.
film is to me.
It's weird that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, so like, how we are when it comes to, teaching our own history in like the UK, and we're not really good at it. Like, we're not like, I mean, like, I get that it is possibly difficult to, so like learn about, so like your own country's history and stuff, especially the dark parts. But like thinking back to my history lessons in school, I don't think we ever had anything like that. Like we never learned about, how we tried to stifle like the American independence movement, and like we sent redcoats over there to basically crush the traitors to the empire or anything like that. We like that's just sort of glossed over, and then we just skip right to World War II where we fought the Nazis, and that's all we ever did. And it's like, no, like, or like when we're taught about the empire and stuff, we were just taught about how we brought railroads to India and they liked it and it was all good. And what apartheid? The
Yes, what about
railroads.
apartheid? What's that?
Yeah, well, I don't
Never
know.
heard of it.
I've never heard of her.
Apartheid? I don't even know her.
We should learn about the bad parts of our history as well,
There
I
is
think.
something I notice.
Mm,
There is something that has to be noted, in that history is written by the winners. If you happen to be one of the big imperialist, colonialist countries,
like
such
America or
as
the
China,
UK or
Russia, America, and the UK, you write your own history and
uh,
you depict yourself as the good guy, regardless of overwhelming evidence of the contrary. If you are one of the countries whose lost has been defeated, like Italy, you tend to value your history a little bit more. And valuing our history is the only thing that's preventing us from relieving fascism, which doesn't fully work. Berlusconi was allowed to exist in our political world and influenced everything that came after it. We are constantly, it feels as if we are constantly teetering on the edge of another regime with every new right, center right, far right government.
mm,
So to see this film tackling fascism with such clear eyes, unmitigated by lies or romanticism, or we've got to think about the kids' rhetoric,
mm.
It is so refreshing, but also so very terrible in the best way.
Yeah. Which actually brings me nicely on to my next note, which is a little bit later. Um, I was basing this off of the Disney movie because that was my only real experience of Pinocchio. I've never read the books. But like I was like, oh, well, like usually they go to what like the Pleasure Island or whatever or the Land of Toys and they become like an ass, like a donkey and stuff. And I was waiting for that. I was like, wait, I'm not really seeing anything that's like leading towards this. And I was like, oh, a different kind of ass.
This makes way too much sense.
mm.
Essentially, in this much more grounded realm of
Well,
Pinocchio
because it's
during
like
fascist Italy,
yeah, and
yes,
it's like the whole like
Toyland is.
the
Yeah.
boys are oh we're just being boys and stuff. We're gonna have a fun time with war and everything, and it's like oh my god, that kind of like even though they're petrified and stuff, but like they've got all these stupid ideas that adults have put in their heads, like the kid and his father, like the Podesta.
Yes, Lucignolo and
Mm-hmm.
his father in this
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
film,
Mm-hmm.
Candlewick, if you will. Yes, it makes all the sense in the world that in this version of the classic Carlo Collodi's fable, Toyland is replaced by a military youth camp.
Where they get to play with
Toyland was
weapons and
the place where childhood goes to die, and during fascism, this is where childhood goes to die.
so they
This is the
still
result of indoctrination. This is the result of propaganda. This is the youth as epitomized by the song of the same name.
mm. But yeah, and then I've got another note which was just gun. Just one word gun. When Ron Perlman's character, the Podesta, yeah, like the toys go away and he just shoves the actual gun over to him and he tells him to like shoot Pinocchio. Like in retrospect, yeah, the Podesta knows that he can't die at this point, but that's not the point. Like the point is like
Now, he was willing to shoot his own son, so that doesn't really matter.
No, no, but I'm saying that the Podesta knows that Pinocchio can't die, but the fact that he's
We
like
should talk about that.
he's pushing his son to literally, it's like obey your father and kill your friend, and it's like, oh my god, it's like, what is this
Right.
movie?
So this is
It's
not
good in a horrible
exactly.
way.
So what's good about this film is that it manages to craft a very difficult tone to craft, in that it is both meant for children but also meant for adults. It is the very definition, the proper definition of a family film, in that children and adults can enjoy it at different levels. The children will be wowed by the animation and the whimsy and the characters, whereas the adults will hopefully forget about everything they think they know about animation because they don't know squat. And there is something important and educational to be learned for both the kid and the adult, namely how to recognize fascist oppression and indoctrination when they see it, and also the importance of being yourself, being able to express yourself, imagination, especially if the world refutes your right to exist.
Mm.
And in that sense, Pinocchio is very strong. Also, you mentioned that Pinocchio cannot die. What's up with that? We haven't explained that yet. We
Well,
haven't talked about
I,
that.
yeah, I did. Like I said, freaking died in exclamation mark. Right. So yeah, no, the fact that he dies, right, and the whole like you get a second Boogan, which I think is voiced by Tilda Swinton.
I
Um,
have to say, this is the most Guillermo Del Toro esque
mhm.
twist imaginable.
Oh, and the rabbits playing cards and everything. It's like, oh my god, I love that.
Pinocchio dies, for context, and he gets sent into the
Well,
afterlife.
it's more like a way station than like an actual, like it's not your final destination. It's sort of like a midpoint, a sort of limbo that he goes to, and he doesn't die, but every time he sort of dies, unquote, because of the shenanigans of the Blue Fairy. Since he's not really alive, he can't really die.
What it means to be a real boy, as in what it means to be human, human condition, and he cannot experience the full joy of living because the joy of living is confined by the fact that life is finite. What this means for Pinocchio is that he's going to have an uphill battle in learning to appreciate, respect, and love life, which is his arc, and he definitely does that by the end of it. And I must say, in this context, so this is Pinocchio, which means we must have the giant dogfish climax. But in the context of this Pinocchio, where everything is a lot more grounded, where the Toyland is literally the military youth camp, which is very realistic for the time, the dogfish feels so out of place. I would argue that the fantastical afterlife segments feel a bit out of place, but they do contribute to the theming. They ram the point home, if you will. But I think the dogfish doesn't quite feel necessary. The youth camp could have easily been the climax. In fact, we had a pretty satisfying climax already with both the youth camp and Count Volpe and Spazzatura the monkey right there.
Talking about climaxes, the fact that Volpe, like one of the first things he says to him, like early on in the movie, is "I'm gonna make you burn bright like a star," like.
Foreshadowing.
Yes, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh no.
I know the fox and the cat set Pinocchio on fire in the book, so it wasn't out of the realm of possibility for this film to follow the same path as the book in that regard. What does end up being different in regards to character choices in this film is that we don't really have Il Gatto e la Volpe in this one, or rather, we have a different version of both. Il Gatto is replaced by Spazzatura, the monkey, which is the sidekick to Count Volpe. Count Volpe is basically Mangiafuoco in this. He's actually a hybrid between La Volpe and Mangiafuoco. They fused the two characters together.
In his appearance, isn't he? Like with his sideburns and everything.
The fun part about the classic fairy tale is that it is usually left to interpretation whether the cat and the fox are literally anthropomorphic cat and fox. In some cases, depending on who you ask, depending on the version of it, they might just be a couple of men who are known to be the cat and the fox. But again, it depends on the context. And in the context of this Pinocchio, it makes absolute sense that the man is not literally a fox. After all, we are trying to ground this into a measure of historical fiction. So the man is very much designed like I would design a Osamu Tezuka villain, specifically, with that hairstyle and his similitude to a fox. And he does both the fox scenes and the Mangiafuoco scenes. He's all over the place. And I'm not just saying that because he's voiced by Christoph Waltz, an actor that likes to go all over the place constantly. But yes, that's actually Christoph Waltz's voice coming out of it.
We need to clear this up. What was his accent Italian or not? Because I could not make heads or tails of it.
His accent was not anything. I think it's just Christoph Waltz being Christoph Waltz. A huge chunk of the film has Pinocchio going back and forth between the carnival who's visiting town and his father, and then he goes ultimately with the carnival after he has an argument with his father when Geppetto says some heartful things to him without really meaning them, which sadly is often the case. Call it expectations meeting reality, if you will. Yeah. Geppetto's expectations meeting the reality of Pinocchio not being his dead child. There is something I would like to bring up about Pinocchio, specifically about his design, because that is such a brilliant design. It is an appearance purposely designed to look unfinished. Because
the fact that he's got nails in his back as well. Kind of like
he's got nails in his back. He was not painted. Is the basic wooden carved model. His father created him as he was drunk. He never
Mm.
finished, he never colored him, he was left incomplete. But that's the beauty of it, because it informs the personality and his arc as a character through the genius character design. He's incomplete as a person, but he becomes complete by the end of it,
Well, that,
metaphorically
yeah,
speaking.
that brings me to my final note that I had, which was real boys don't come back, which is like, oh my God, what a line. Just but the fact that he breaks the rules of the like way station by smashing his egg timer. So instead of it just being like a blessing from the blue fairy to become like real, as it were, or like mortal and stuff, like it's a choice that he makes, which I think is such a better way to go about telling the story, because it's an ethical thing where he has done something that he knows puts himself at risk, but it's the right thing
Yeah,
to do.
the original Adventures of Pinocchio was definitely a product of its time, one that has a specific idea of a message and moral that's in line to the Christian establishment, if you will. This, in this version of Pinocchio, what it means to be good does not translate with obeying the rules. In fact, he breaks the rules in the name of love, and in doing so, he becomes the real boy. He becomes the real boy the moment he learns to appreciate the importance of life. He becomes a real boy the moment he,
Understands how fragile life is.
for a time, he had a very nonplussed, hunky dory attitude to the fact that he was dying
Yeah.
all the time. He's a child who thinks he is immortal. We've all been there, by the way. We all think we are indestructible as children. But growing up does not come at the expense of imagination, does not come at the expense of self expression, being true to yourself. Growing up means taking responsibility for your actions for the benefit of those who you love.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him a real boy. And what makes this resolution so powerful in the end, when he goes back, when he breaks the rules in the underworld, breaks his timer, his hourglass, because he had to save his father from drowning after escaping the dogfish, in what is essentially the climax from Jaws, come to think of it. When he does that, he forsakes his immortality. Pinocchio never stops being Pinocchio. He never transforms into a
Yeah.
quote unquote real
Yeah.
boy of
That
flesh and blood.
I
He
I
is the same. He's
I
the same
yeah.
puppet. He's the same Pinocchio as he was at the beginning, because being his true self, being himself, was always the right thing
Well,
for him to do.
I lied. I had one final note here. It's the last line. Didn't turn human. Didn't need to. Because
Exactly.
yeah,
I never liked the idea of Pinocchio turning human at the end of his adventure, which belies the implication that
he wasn't real before.
all of the journey and the arc and the growth he's had
Well,
as a character up to the
yeah.
point would not mean anything unless he literally becomes a boy of flesh and blood. At the end of the day, Pinocchio is Pinocchio. He is not the best boy of your dreams. He's not the ideal child that Geppetto wanted. He is not the perfect soldier that the fascist wanted. He is just Pinocchio. And now is just a better version of himself,
Yeah.
but still himself.
A similar thing, you probably already know the story, but a similar thing happened with, the Beauty and the Beast. They did multiple different test screenings, with like test audiences before it was released, using different characters, for, the prince, because you don't really get to see the prince, right? At the beginning of the story, I don't think. I think it's so silhouetted. So, like they needed like, a character that the audience would be happy with, which is, what the beast would, turn into when he becomes human again. And no matter what they tried, the audience never liked it.
They have known
The beast,
because they've
like
known the
they fell
beast
in love with the
as the
beast.
character.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
not
they saw the
some
character. They were
guy.
compelled to his story. They saw him grow as a character, and then he just turns into some guy that
Well,
nobody
that's the thing.
knows.
In the end, they just had to go with some guy, and that's why he looks like the most generic Disney guy ever, because like they literally couldn't go with anything else. They had to go completely middle of the road because people would be disappointed no matter what. So.
Yes, he turns into John Smith, disappointingly.
But it's that's why Shrek was so popular as well. I also like that he goes off in the end. Like it says that once Jiminy and Geppetto had passed on, that like he went on his own adventures. Oh, sorry, and the monkey as well. Like the monkey joined the crew. But the fact that he goes on his own adventures and it's like leaves it up to the audience, or the child watching, what he did next and stuff, is like so on point with those old stories, like those old bedtime stories, because that's always what happens with the hero at the end and stuff. Like you never leave it as a, and then their adventures were over. The end. They never did anything. They just ate biscuits and had tea and stuff. It's like no, then they went off. Like you decide what they did. Especially I think Winnie the Pooh did that as well. Like Christopher Robin just like goes off to school. Like he's too old to like hang out with like Winnie anymore. But like the story doesn't end just because the book ends. Is what I'm saying. And
Exactly. Finally, I want to address the very last final frame of this film.
go ahead.
When Pinocchio has left, Gemini Cricket is still narrating the story, even though he's dead at this point. And the camera pans up to the tree, which is the tree that replaced Pinocchio's tree. We see a single pine cone hanging off a branch. And then it falls. The cycle of death, life, and rebirth all over again. The meaning of life, if you will. And what really hits me hard about this final frame is the voiceover of the cricket, leaving us with these final words.
What happens, happens. And then we are gone.
Yeah.
That's life. It's beautiful, it's
Sad.
timeless, it's universally understandable. And then the film ruins everything with the musical number in the end credits.
Okay.
So we have been singing the lauds, praising the laurels of this film, if that's even an expression. We love it, it's good, you should watch it, we highly recommend it. But I do have a laundry list of grievances about it.
It's the music. I did like little bits of it, like the fact that a lot of the ensembles were woodwind was like really nice. Like is I see what you did there, but none of the songs were earworms for me. Like after a few days, I wasn't like humming them or anything. Jiminy kept wanting to sing his song about his dad, and he never got the chance to. It just it's either eaten by a whale, smushed, or whatever.
It's a dogfish.
Dogfish, sorry. Did I say whale? I'm sorry.
This is Disney's fault, not yours.
Okay.
In that regard, I have to say that the songs are indeed unmemorable, not especially catchy. Also, the way they are spaced out in this film is very uncanny. This film does not come off as a musical film, but rather a film that has some musical numbers in it. And the way these songs tend to come up, they feel more like they are there to pad out the length, which I still believe did not need to be 2 hours long. Moreover, they clash with the established tone of the setting. The historical fiction at work in this film does not lend exactly well to sporadic numbers of non-diegetic musical performances. There is an exception to that. I like the Pinocchio song when he comes to life the first time and is just
I was
so
asking, like, what,
overjoyed by being alive.
yeah.
I would argue that's also the only moment in the film that actually entertained me in a comedic light. Here's another issue I have with the film, a very subjective one, I'm sure. I don't find it particularly funny.
Mm.
The film is not trying to be funny all the time, as we have established, obviously. But when it does try to be funny on purpose, it's usually a scene handled by the designated comic relief character, the Gemini Cricket, which I don't find very funny at all. I don't really like him as a comic relief. He's frankly a bit useless in this film. I was just waiting for his scenes to be over so that we can move on to the important parts that actually matter. The cricket has a couple of very good scenes, especially at the end. After the climax with the dogfish scene, and he wishes to the Blue Fairy to bring back Pinocchio to life because of his sacrifice, his noble sacrifice. It's a very good scene. The final voiceover he has at the end of it, which, as we said, is very good and very powerful. The rest of his entire voiceover narration, although not so much. It's a bit annoying. The film has these moments in which is a touch on the nose for my liking. For example, that entire prologue with Geppetto and his soon-to-be dead son lays it so thick, the imminent tragedy, that it's almost unintentionally comic. Geppetto sings his "Oh, I love my son, I hope he doesn't die" song as a very, very banal montage plays out. And then he dies in the church looking at the Jesus Christ crucified as the bomb falls down. Again, it's a bit too on the nose, too obvious for my liking.
The only other thing I think is the okay, this is gonna be the most nitpicky thing ever, right? Is the movement of the monkey. I I get it's stop motion and you can't have the monkey like in the air, but the fact that they tried to do the walk cycles with it constantly making contact with the ground meant that at least early on, I think they figured it out later on, but at least early on, it looks very clunky and very heavy, almost like a gorilla running, as opposed to like this little spry monkey who should be like bouncing in the air. But like he's constantly making contact with the ground. Like I said, this is the most nitpicky thing ever. Ruined it for me. Bad movie. 0 out of 10. No.
Right. Well, I do believe that Del Toro's demands for cinematic perfection with this film occasionally do tend to clash with what are the natural limits of the art form of stop motion animation. For example, the fact that he wanted to shoot all of this in once with stop motion animation, which requires a much bigger workflow, a much bigger count of frames per second.
Mm.
And this film looks and feels like it's a Herculean task to put together. Once again, it took 9 years to make it, and it's 2 hours long. And I will reiterate to oblivion and back that it did not need to be 2 hours long.
Yeah. I think the runtime could have been cut down a little bit in certain places. But other than that, like, final thoughts on the movie. I kind of liked it. It's definitely worth a watch, and it's definitely the best Pinocchio movie we've had in a while.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily the best ever, if you ask my professional opinion. I've seen several adaptations of Pinocchio. This one is absolutely the best.
I don't know. P3K is pretty cool. Yeah, Pinocchio's a robot.
I am going to strangle you. I'm going to reach across the screen and strangle you, Melody. Don't even begin.
You need to put an image of P3K. Apparently, there's a horror
No.
movie called Revenge of Pinocchio. That might be pretty good. Oh no.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. Please. Okay, so to reiterate our thoughts for the conclusive portion of this podcast, this film is nothing short of a masterpiece,
It's
a
very
love
good.
letter to animation, a love letter to the history of animation, a love letter to film and cinema, to the craft of filmmaking as a whole. It is a impactful, tough, bold interpretation of its source material, which somehow retains the whimsy and the flimsy and the fairy tale aspects of it, retains the spirit of Carlo Collodi's classic novel, and readapts it, recontextualizes it into a much more grounded, dire, historic setting that forces us to engage with the text in a different way. It forces us to interrogate our notions of what it means to be a good person, what it means to live, and especially what it means to live and be a good person under fascist oppression.
Um. So yeah, I think we might call the podcast there. But if there's another movie that you'd like us to watch or review, do let us know. New Maman, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to say? Yes, I would, Melly. I like that movie. Geppetto becomes a puppet. You remember that movie? Yeah, I do. That was a good one. That was not the movie that we were talking about, was it, Newman? No, but
Uh,
it's. I'm sorry,
I'm working with children. I
Newman.
think
You
this is
come
as
over
good a
here on my
time
desk.
as any to mention
Mm.
the fact that we are making both a audio version of this podcast and a video version of this podcast.
Oh my
And
God! What's happened to
the
your legs, Madhog?
yes, you can see the character model, and I've been
He
severed in
had legs.
half, and my
It's
legs are
true.
not moving, as you
So
can see.
I made him
I
some legs.
so you can see all of that and appreciate the fun of it, I suppose, in the video version. But you will also be able to hear the audio version of it, which will most likely come out earlier than the video one. We'll
But
be
yeah.
posting this podcast in every available platform. This will be your job, Melody.
Oh, I don't know
Yeah.
how to do that. But we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Okay.
you'll be
Okay.
fine. You'll be fine.
Okay.
And I'll be handling the editing. And I
Anyway.
am not looking forward to that. But anyway, this was our pilot episode of our podcast, and it's
And if
about
you'd
a
like us
film that we
to
both
comment and
enjoyed.
subscribe and smash them eggs and
Hold on, Melly, hold on. Where can people find you?
on the internet.
Directions, Melody. Specific directions. All right, Melody has a Twitter profile at
No, he's
Melody
making it
Dickens.
too easy for them.
And you also have a YouTube channel, and she has a Twitch streaming channel. They all go by Melody Dickens, so you cannot be mistaken. I also have a Twitter profile. My handle is Madhog Thy Master, but you can also find me at Adriano Bordoni1. I have a Tumblr account, also known as Madhog Thy Master. I have a YouTube channel, which you guessed it, is also known as Madhog Thy Master.
And that's thy, as in THY, not thigh. That's just a little
I am
joke.
definitely
Okay,
I am definitely don't feel like the master of thighs right now, considering my lower half is severed.
Hang on. I can fix that. Wait.
You can fix this.
Yeah, there we
Really?
go. Now you're the thigh master.
I cannot wait to see that in post-production.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody.
you,
We have been Madhog and Melody.
And
hey,
Newman.
Eminem. We're Eminem.
We'll speak
We've
soon.
been Eminem. And I guess we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye. We should call ourselves M&Ms. Okay, bye.
No,
Bye,
that's taken.
Bye.
Good night,
Love
everybody.
You all, love you all. Bye. Newman kiss. Okay, goodbye.
Keep going.
Okay. There's a Digiforce in a Digiland. When the digipast and digipresent collide, it's time to digitize.
Clip this, chat.
Melly is a giant. Yeah.